back to the Fantasy Rugby Draft podcast. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson. Joining me again in the booth is the man primarily made of moss, Nathan Mossman. How are you, mate?
Do you remember back in the old days where we actually had a run sheet or something which gave us some sort of semblance of structure before we actually did this? We don't even have that anymore.
Days of yore. No.
You wouldn't have thought it was possible for this podcast to go backwards in terms of professionalism, but that's actually what we've done. So,
I was going to go the other way. It's amazing how slick and professional this podcast is without a run sheet. That's a testament to yourself and your professionalism and all the media courses we've put you through.
It's pretty slick on the weeks we don't do it. There's barely a hiccup.
Absolutely. In this pod, we're going to have a review of Gameweek 11, and well, actually, we're not going to have a review as such. We're not going to actually look at the games, but we'll go through each of them and have a look at the teams, have a look at some players, because there's been quite a bit of player movement, whether it be injuries, coming back from injuries, players going to under 20s, not under 20s, that type of thing. You can follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Rugby Draft, or follow us on Facebook at Fantasy Rugby Draft. And if you wanted to, I'll cut this bit out. And on there, you can check out the top 5 leagues and the top 5 managers. Shout out to the High Veld Bowl. Well done, folks. You guys are crushing it. 11 on the bounce. Nicely done. Right, let's crack straight into it. Hurricane Stormers. I guess probably the big news, and you're probably a little bit more acutely aware of it because you own Bob du Preez. What have you done this week to mitigate his, shoulder peck or something?
No, it was a peck. Yeah, I think as we were watching it, I actually sort of thought it must have been a peck because it wasn't sort of in the place where you'd expect a shoulder. Obviously my expert medical opinion, but not a whole lot, to be honest with you, because I weighed up the possibility, and when it came down to it on the waiver wire was, well, do I go for Jean-Luc du Preez, or do I go for Damian de Allende, who I read in the same article which was discussing that injury, that he was back to full training, Senatla's back to full training, and they were unsure about what was going to happen at fly half because Jean-Luc's apparently he's not training, so he's not necessarily immediately going to be back after the bye. So in a perfect world, look, I would have taken both, but I in the end, I made the conscious decision to actually go for de Allende, and I'll try and find a solution somewhere else because at the moment there was another name mentioned, some sort of youth player, who's
Brandon Thompson.
Yeah, that'll be him, sure. So, I mean, who knows? I mean, it's just a little bit unclear how far away Jean-Luc is maybe, but hey.
Yep, that's exactly. It's funny. You and I actually haven't discussed this. I only put 2 waiver claims in that league, and it was Damian de Allende and Jean-Luc.
In that order.
In that order. Yep.
Right. Yep.
And you had number 3, I think, and I had number 5.
That's right. Yep.
So you grabbed it. I didn't really need Jean-Luc du Preez. I could get by with who I was scrubbing along with, Sopawanga and John O'Lance. I think I've got on my team at the moment. But I kind of thought, and I read the same article as you, they talked about Dylan Lates coming in maybe to 10 and Brandon Thompson, who's apparently fairly accurate off the tee, playing in varsity grade or wherever he's playing at the moment. Exactly that. Jean-Luc hadn't actually been training yet, but I wondered if they might start pushing the envelope a little bit, and 2 weeks is a long time. They've got the bye, so I thought, well, if I've got the space at the end of this week, I'll hold on to him. If not, then so be it. Another name that was mentioned in that same article as Damian de Allende was Senatla as well. So I wonder if they do make that choice of Lates going into 10, then Senatla probably comes onto that wing as well. So I don't know. There's a lot to do with the Stormers. Everyone knows why they're attractive because of their playoff runs and the playoff fixtures. So I think there's going to be some interesting decisions come the end of this week when there's a lot sitting out there who've got buys.
Yeah, well, Senatla was actually a name mentioned earlier in this segment, so clearly you took paying attention.
Did you mention him as well?
I did, yeah.
Oh, yeah, his brother or surveyor? So I wondered also if that might have
his brother
a knock-on
Frank.
Touche. SP kicking as well, so he seems to be taking the long-range kicks anyway with Bob du Preez. So I just wonder if maybe if it isn't Jean-Luc, then SP might be coming in as well. Peter Steph-Toy and Itzabeth look to be back after the bye. I think that's exactly the same article, right, that they talked about both of those?
Oh, I think they basically said, I think we're done for this tour. There's no point in rolling these guys out. Let's just send them home and get them to rest up.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's an interesting point because it is the time to trade for the Stormers on a bye. You're going to prey on those folks who need, and that sounds a bit predatory. I guess it is.
It's exactly what it is, yeah. But.
Yep, that's right. But I just think that if you've got the opportunity for players, or at least teams that do need to win this week, if they lose and they're out, then there's no point if they have holes at outside back. Sitting with SP on your bench, you've got a valuable asset. You've got to weigh up whether the guy that you can pick up on the waiver wire and start this week will be the same value as the guy that you could trade SP Murray for. So I think it goes both sides. You have to swallow your pride if you are that person that's in knockout competition, knockout spot straight away. You need to be able to see what you can get and weigh up the consequences of having that waiver wire value. And on the other side of it, you've got to go looking. There is always that person that's on the cusp that you can have a chat with and see if you can play a trade at it. There's no playing for tomorrow when you're right on the cusp of those playoffs. Actually, that's probably a good segue at the moment. So we talk about this time of year again, every year, about the subject of trades, when a lot of managers are slowly losing a grip on the playoff spot, and some that are out already. We're still a little bit flabbergasted that we have to talk about this, and it's around collusion and trading. There's a lot of unwritten rules in our leagues at least where, and I don't understand why people would want to give other managers a leg up, but you see a lot of these really good players shifting hands for pittance going on to playoff-bound teams from those that are out of the playoffs, and it can't happen. We don't have any functionality in the site at the moment to reverse trades or veto trades, which we will eventually get to, but for now you're going to have to police that for yourselves and just have a little bit of, I guess, integrity. Any craziness going on in any of your leagues yet? I guess they're fairly established, your leagues.
Yeah, I think people generally understand that kind of thing's not going to happen. I did have a chat with somebody who, I think we've actually talked about this before, who was telling me, well, Ben Smith's such a great player, it'd be a shame for him to not be in the playoffs. We know it's just kind of like, just blows my mind. It's like, you've been playing this game for a couple of years now. You sort of hope you grasp the concept by now. But,
I'd forgotten about that. That's such a good yarn.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think the way I would sort of spin it or sell it was to say to people, well, look, if you're on the receiving end of that, if you're playing against somebody, say, coming into the playoffs who had just been gifted all these players, how would you feel about it? You'd be pretty annoyed. So, yeah, that's kind of what I'd say to people.
Yeah, that's right. Back to the Hurricanes, so Geordie Barrett, for those that have been under a rock, is not going to the under-20s, so those who held on to him, congratulations, you're probably in for a decent windfall. Milner Scudder back in a week or two, is that what you heard as well?
A week or two, yeah, but it could be closer to week 14, I think, even. It wasn't sounding particularly encouraging. It was almost at the point, well, he's not going to have enough time before the Lions test to actually show any form. So don't hang your hat on that. Yeah,
that's right. You and I watched the Hurricanes Stormers match together, and you brought up an interesting theory, or someone was having a chat to you about Severe at 8 and his output.
Yeah, I mean, someone, literally had traded Severe away under the kind of the pretense that he's not as effective at 8 or wouldn't score the same number of points. And to be fair, if you look at the points scored week to week, there is something to that. I mean, whether that's it or not, but he just hasn't been the same player. He was putting up 30 plus through the first 3 to 4 weeks. I think he might have put up 3 out of 4 with 30 plus, something in that range anyway. But since then, I don't think he's broke 20.
Yeah, that's right. And the fellow who traded it obviously got top dollar for it, so well done. Any more players you wanted to discuss, Hurricane Stormers?
Not really. I guess Dane Coles, but once again, we don't know a whole lot.
No, we don't. It brings the Hurricanes front row back to the pack, though, doesn't it? Quite significantly.
Yeah. I mean, I could almost imagine, one of us the day after the podcast just developing concussion symptoms, because it seems you can just pick them up doing anything these days.
You say before, I think most people would suspect I had picked up a lot of concussion before recording a lot of podcasts.
It would explain a lot, yeah.
It did. Highlanders Cheetahs, not much happened in this match. Pretty boring. Should we move on?
Actually, have you actually seen what the HIA test is like? So I actually found it online. They had what the IRB actually give people as the assessment tool.
Is it one of those US cop shows that, they make them walk along the line and backwards?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's exactly like that. No, it's actually just a sheet of paper with a bunch of questions on there, and I was talking to somebody about it, and some of them were relatively straightforward, but you could see how they'd be effective. It was things like, what ground are we at? Who did we play last week? Stuff that, if you were feeling a bit fuzzy, you might not get right. But then it came down to other things where they'd read out, say, 4 numbers, and you had to read them back in reverse order. And I was thinking, shit, I could probably the best times.
Yeah,
it's like the crypto.
It sounds, yeah, that's right. It sounds like they moved on a little bit. I remember when the old HIA test, or its equivalent, maybe this is NFL, I'm not too sure, where they have, how many fingers am I holding up type thing, and the guy clearly can't see a thing, but old mate's tapping him on the shoulder, he's telling him. Or, the same thing, what day of the week it is, and you get 3 taps on your shoulder from the trainer.
That's like there was a famous old story about a horse that could count that they had at the fair, and what the horse would do is that he'd read out a number, and the horse would start tapping his foot. But the horse was reading his body language, and he would know when the guy kind of relaxed or did something, and he'd stop. So that's how he knew when to stop. So it's very, very similar.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Very, very similar. I thought. Let's move on to Marty Banks. One more week to go. Speaking of horses.
Sure, yeah. Horse for courses, yeah.
Indeed. One more week to go to Sapawanga, I understand. If you can, get what you can for Marty Banks. I think he's probably got one more in him. But if you've got Sapawanga in your team and sitting on the bench with Banks, you've got the perfect kind of storm. But if you've got Banks, I think it's worth see if you can get a little bit of set something back for him, potentially for those guys who need to win today. A lot of points in this match. Where do you want to point at? Which, I guess, for us, Sergio Peterson back into form. He loves these kind of games, right? The tackling optional type games.
Well, you say that, but I mean, even against the Crusaders, who we'd mentioned previously were the hardest team in pretty much every category to score against, from a fantasy perspective, didn't have a problem. He is just sort of we talk about it probably too frequently about making his own shot, but he can literally just make something out of nothing. He pops up. He's just kind of everywhere. He's just a great fantasy option.
Yeah, he is. And Faddis goes as far as Ben Smith goes in terms of his health. Faddis at 15 is, it's just points. And he got a yellow card, and goodness gracious, ridiculous yellow card, I might add, but still scored 1,000 points. Fred Zerlinger, he's back in the 10 role scoring points, but they're on tour in New Zealand now, so I expect that to dry up a little bit. Certainly they have for everybody else as well. Cheetahs front row go about their business. But I guess the Cheetahs also, you have to kind of factor in that they have the same semi-final week 2 issues that other teams have. Mm-hmm. Anyone else you want to chat there, mate?
Not really. Raymond Rule, man of the match, couldn't really understand that, but there you go.
Yeah, I know. Interesting one, that one. Rebels Lions. This is a pretty interesting match as well. Actually, quick spot quiz for you. Can you name me the number 2 scoring Fantasy Rugby Draft player this season?
Is it Lionel Cronje?
No, it's not. So number 1, obviously, is an easy one. Damian McKenzie. I think he's almost a third ahead of number 2. Congratulations to everybody who lucked into Damian McKenzie at number 1 or 2 in your draft. You're probably leading your leagues at the moment, but no, it's not. It's player in the Rebels Lions game. It's a little bit of a surprise. I was a little bit surprised, but it just shows his consistency, and it also shows how dangerous he is, and he's got to be in Springbok contention.
Is it Kutsia?
No, it's Courtnall Skolsan.
Skolsan, of course. Yeah, see, look, that just shows how under the radar he is.
Totally. That's a great one. Even though the commentators were betting about, I don't know, 150 and distinguished between him and Mahuza, they could not do it. It was funny because the Lions are spreading the ball backwards from sideline to sideline, and they did say, Kosan takes it down, and then they get to the other side, and you'd hear him think over in his head, and Kosan's on the hang
Yeah,
on.
you think that can't be him.
Physically can't happen.
Do I double down? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But no, he's going really, really well. Combrink coming back, played club rugby this week, so that'll probably be the end of Mahuza when Combrink does actually come back. So it depends when that actually happens. But again, see what you can get for Mahuza.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange time of the season because we've come almost full circle where we're talking about these players now that we haven't talked about for weeks. Like Milner Scudder and Combrink and Sapawanga, Lambie, Dag,
Lende.
All of these guys they've just been, they've sort of disappeared and they're all coming back at around about the same time.
Yeah, that's right, absolutely. And that's kind of where you do need to have your finger on the pulse to understand when these guys are coming back, because a lot of the guys you just mentioned now, they've already been snapped up in a lot of leagues. I know the waiver wire was frantically busy with a lot of de Allende's this week.
Yeah, and obviously Charlie Ngatai last week.
Exactly. Amanaki Mafi, I quite like his bucking bronco style. Did you see that where he does the bucking bronco kind of if he's got a big run up?
Yeah.
Gets all fired up and does
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. No, he's a number one loose forward.
He is.
Yeah.
No, he's an absolute wrecking ball. And the Rebels don't have that bad of fixtures. I know I'm not tipping them to win any competitions or even win any matches, but certainly there's value in those studs in Murphy, Hodge and English, for instance, and maybe even Naivalu if they can ever get the ball to him.
Yeah. I mean, you have to say the Waratahs isn't looking like a particularly tough fixture.
No, that's right.
In fact, none of those. In fact, they're in their run-in, they play all of the other Aussie teams, the Crusaders and the Jags, and the Jags game is at home in the final. So, yeah, not too bad.
Yeah, the Rebels keep wheeling out bums at 10, though, for goodness gracious. I know you and I have been saying, well, certainly I've been saying this for a while, but I read a tweet on Twitter that was echoing our thoughts. For all the good signings that the Crusaders have done in the last kind of 5-10 years, the best bit of business was getting rid of Vola Vola. He's stealing a living, man. Goodness gracious. I don't know. And it's only because he's got Jackson Garden Basham there as well, who hasn't exactly ripped up trees, which is a bit of a shame that he's starting that role. And Jack DeBrashini is, well, where's he? 15, 10? They don't really know either. But back to players that do have value. So I think there are a lot of managers that have seen what Hodge and English have been doing for the last few weeks and not been that impressed. And I suspect they haven't necessarily looked forward to these run of fixtures, and maybe you can get them. I know I've been trying to get English. Hodge may be a little bit too expensive because he's got that goal kicking, he's got that name. But players like English and Murphy, I think, are worth trading for. Anyone from Lions Rebels you want to go at?
Maybe just Corabetti, I think, like you were talking about the fixtures, there's probably another one. He's been kicking around on the waiver wire. I just get the impression that he's starting to come to grips with the game a little bit more. He's more involved.
Yep, I agree. I think I feel there's a big game there just right around the corner for him. And exactly what you said. He's getting used to the game. That covering tackle that he did, he wouldn't have made in like the first 3 or 4 weeks. That was exceptional. That
was a beauty, yeah. He had no right to make it.
No, he was gone for all money. All right, your beloved Reds against the Chiefs. I guess let's go with Cruden to start with and Stephen Donald. So I believe it's concussion for Cruden, was it? Or symptoms at least?
Concussion symptoms, yeah. Almost like that Dane Coles thing where he picked it up just in the middle of the week, seemingly out of nothing. I'm not too worried about that.
No. Reading a Sudoku, you reckon, trying to finish it off? Just couldn't do it?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I wondered that too. I wondered whether, because they've got the bye, they've got a chance to get him back fit, and it's the Crusaders, if I'm not wrong, in Fiji, is it, or is it Samoa? I can't remember. One of those two.
Somebody probably asked him, what his pay packet was from wherever it is he's going to in France, and it was such a long number trying to read it out. He just got confused and sort of alerted the doctors.
He got a bit prickly with that, didn't he? When he signed, did you remember that interview?
No.
He started calling out the journalist by saying, "How would you like it if we published your salary over? Everyone talks about your salary. It's just not something that's talked about in New Zealand." And the reporter was like, "Fill your boots, mate. I'm on nothing." It was very amusing. Charles Ngatai, good to see him back. Looked to take a little bit of time to get into it, but that last half he looked. Not back to his best, but he's going to form a good combination in the middle. What about Puluins versus Stevenson? Who do you think actually has the inside running if they were playing the final?
Well, we had this discussion a while back, and we thought it was Stevenson, and obviously it proved it's not. It's almost impossible to tell now. I mean, and now Tim Nana-Williams will be back in the mix before too long, and things really start getting cloudy.
True, that's a good point for that 30 minutes that he doesn't get injured. For the Reds, they've got some value this week. They're playing the Rebels, so I think for those that are right on the cusp, that have a Damien McKenzie, SP Murray type kind of hole in your team, and that you're carrying them, someone like Chris Kurandrani and maybe Carmichael Hunt's probably going to be owned, but those types of players are going to be available, and they're playing the Rebels at home, and I think we can see the paper thin defence those guys put up, and it's usually a fairly high scoring game with both. But any more for these two?
No, I was trying to think to myself about who's been the most disappointing high profile fly half, and
that hasn't been injured.
That hasn't been injured, obviously, not taking injuries into account. And I think Cooper's got to be up there, right? I mean, Sanchez, I suppose, is probably disappointed a bit as well, but Cooper's been, he's a first choice, which is a little bit different. Like Sanchez is kind of a little bit in and out of the team, but he hasn't really done a whole lot.
No, that's true. That's very true. Suspended, I guess, for a wee bit, but yeah, it's true. He hasn't really. I think there was one or two games that he played quite well with at the start, and then he hasn't really. He's come back to earth a little bit. I wonder if it's tough when you play New Zealand teams a lot, and now they're coming back to the comforts of home, if you will, the Aussie conference. Let's see where they get. Bounce back week this week from Karevi. Look out. If you're playing him this week, I'd shudder to think how many points he's going to score. I hope Paiua comes back, because he's not the same player at 12 years at 13. And they have to shuffle 1,000 people for just one injury. It didn't make much sense to me.
I didn't like... it's probably an obvious thing, but I didn't like Karevi at 12 as much as I like him at 13. It was almost that Fiki-Toa thing. Without the space, he just wasn't quite the same.
Makes it a little bit easier for it doesn't quite get the same amount of steam up, run the same kind of angles, and it just brings those loose forwards into play a little bit to give them an opportunity. Yeah. It's like what the Sharks did to try and nullify Van Rensburg when he was playing, right? They just put the de Preez twins in there. When you're marking Karevi, you can put two flankers at 12, but it's a little bit difficult trying to put two pillars out at 13 because they've just run around them. Waratahs Blues. Any more for Chiefs Reds?
No.
Waratahs Blues. So the Blues team actually did get named just now. This afternoon. And Sonny Bill Williams' concussion, I think we knew that was out. But it's opened the door for Nanai, which is quite good. He's playing at 15 now. What's good for Nanai owners, should I say. Those who have Michael Collins, probably not quite as tickle pink. And they've gone with Faiani at 12 and Moala at 13. So interesting one this week. Piers Francis, though. He's not really offering a lot of value apart from just being a warm body, really. There's a lot of points scored, and he's not really being part of it.
That's been the way it's been all season. He's just a guy that, like you say, he's just there to distribute. He's there to kick. That's obviously what Tana kind of has wanted, but yeah, from a fantasy option, I expected a lot more and have been disappointed. Did note that Ihai West on the bench this week, so he's back.
Yeah.
I still have a sneaky suspicion that at some point he'll get a run, and that's why I think that West is, if you've got the room, is someone that's worth sort of stashing away, even if it's just for the final, because
totally.
An away game against the Sunwolves, we know Francis is leaving to go to Northampton, so he's not the future of the franchise. We don't know if West is either, but you'd think, well, maybe he deserves a shot at least before, O'Terry Black or somebody potentially comes along. Tana, you'd think he'd want to at least see,
Yep. No, I agree. I suspect it may even be sooner rather than later that West comes into that role. Shout out to Declan O'Donnell. Who knew he was alive? Goodness gracious. Nicely done. Coming back from injury, I do believe. Look, they're playing the Cheetahs. It's supposed to be a little bit wet, or has been wet the last couple of days. Probably check the weather forecast. But here's another player who, if you're in a little bit of a hole and we rattled off a few outside backs who you're out without this week, then he's probably not a bad shout. I know I've picked him up, and I'm going to be starting him over the likes of Verity Am and Curtis Ronas. So not kind of highbrow type players, but kind of fill-ins for a week. Kurandrani, I'd start Declan O'Donnell over all of them.
Would you start him over Carmichael Hunt?
No, I don't think so. No, I think I'd still go Carmichael Hunt. Just that matchup at home. I guess it's a little bit of a tricky one because the Reds play on Saturday night and the Blues on Friday night, so there is an outside chance that Hunt could get pulled on Saturday. I haven't heard anything, and I understand he should be back this week and should be comfortably back, and it was only a 1 week thing, but there's still that outside chance whether you take a bird in the hand with Declan O'Donnell or go with Hunt. But I'd probably still lean Hunt in that situation because it's an early one. You can try and pick up some other outside backs in later games if the worst comes to worst. Patrick Tuivalutu back as well, which is really great. He'll be a force, and again, if you looked at those matchups and you got that final with the Sunwolves, then that's not a bad shout either. Let's just hope he stays fit. Not much to say about Akira Ioane apart from he's good. Luatu's putting up some points as well. I want to talk about the Waratahs though, because they're similar to the Stormers, right? They have a pretty decent run in and good to okay games in the playoffs. And there's going to be some really tough decisions made around Jake Gordon and Ned Hannigan are the two that I kind of am stuck in, because Gordon was pretty poor against the Blues, and Phipps came on, 5 minutes into the second half or something like that, was it?
That's right, yep.
So I wonder, to all intents and purposes, whether Phipps now has that job. I'm not sure I'd be too comfortable having Phipps in my team as a starter. It'd be okay. Gordon certainly has the upside, but what would you do? Are you in this situation with Gordon?
Yes and no. I do have him in a couple of teams, but I've also got another player. So at one point I sort of picked him up as a backup to Kerr Barlow. I think one of the reasons I was hanging on to him was because they do have that non-bye fixture in the second week of the playoffs. So if I can spare the spot, I'm probably still holding on. In another league, I did have him as my first choice, but somehow managed to acquire Louis Schrader. So who I don't mind actually. I'm kind of high on all of the Kings at the moment. So so I agree with you in the sense that I think his time as a starter is going to be sporadic, maybe at best.
Waratahs Rebels next week. So if you've got a lead or if you've got a spare spot going into the last couple of games, maybe the Jags Force games, then maybe it's worth looking at players like Cameron Clark and Reece Robinson if you really are stuck for starting next week. All right, Force Sharks, I'm conscious of time. Nkosi looks all right on the left wing there, worth a pickup. I guess Mvovo's still floating around, but did you see this match? He looked pretty strong. Yeah,
no, he looked decent. I think they probably needed somebody a little bit more explosive, and he maybe offers something a little bit different.
He does, doesn't he? He had one scrubbed off as well. That was.
That's right. Yeah, it was a good one too.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Verity Am, I'm not sure how many of his points came in that one run, but it was a good run nonetheless. And again, they're probably decent shouts if you need fill-ins this week because they're playing the Hawaris. Curtis Rona's probably not a bad shout in terms of going under the radar because he got a yellow card, so his kind of 11 points came down to 3 or 4. So you might be able to have that in your back pocket if you need it. Going into the last match. Bosch has gone to under 20s. It's unlikely that he's going to be playing again in Super Rugby, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Lambie back at 10. Jonah Lance picked up 20 odd points without kicking, so and in a tough matchup, I should point out. So yeah, again they've got the Hawaris this week, so I'm going to be pushing Lance in again. What did you take out of the Sharks Force?
Not a whole lot, I think. I think it says a bit about how the Sharks aren't particularly good. Yep.
No, I'm not 100% sure how good they are either. I think they let the Force into this game a little bit as well. I think there'll be a different Force with Lambie back at 10 though. I think he steers them well. He steers them around the paddock quite well. Crusaders Bulls. I don't really want to talk too much about this game itself. The Crusaders are on a tear at the moment. It's going to be interesting against the Hurricanes this week. Dag's not back this week. I understand he might be playing club rugby for university. One of the names I wanted to... Did you hear about Jono Makalai as well?
No, haven't heard about him.
So apparently he was close to being back this week in terms of he's back in the squad. So I was kind of humming and hawing whether to have a run at him as well, but I'm not sure where he fits in.
No, because there's Digby Ioane as well.
Exactly. And are you going to take Bridge out of the team at the moment?
You couldn't, surely. Yeah.
It's real tough. He's playing superb. And to be fair, so is Havili at 15. So I think they've got a little bit of a luxury to let those guys come back to full fitness and a little bit more when they've got these guys. Ishmael out for 8-10 weeks or something like that for the Bulls.
Yeah, he's done.
Yeah, and I was chatting to Justin Pivus, about a friend of the podcast, Justin Pivus, about the problem with drafting Andre Pollard is that he's got such terrible backups. Tian Skoman and Francois Brummer just, I know they're playing the Crusaders and it was an absolute hiding, but geez, they've flattered to deceive ever since they've ever been playing, right?
That's right. You dabble with them from time to time because you think I'll do okay, and they don't.
Yeah, they suck you in, don't they?
Yeah.
Suck you in. Anything more from this match in terms of players?
Not really.
Holland was okay in a losing battle.
He was okay, yeah. I think he was okay at best. But then Jesse Creel was okay as well. But I think you probably can't look at really anybody else past those guys. So
Jesse Creel was quite good on, decent on attack, but Jack Goodshoe got 1,000 points and ran through him a number of times. So I think they're going to be rethinking him at 13 again. Hawara's Sunwolves. Man, this was a fun match Sunday morning, watching the Cornflakes, wasn't it?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, the Sunwolves, they're not terrible.
No, they're a good team. They're
a
good team. They're missing something, but they're a good team. One of the, if we look at players, there's been quite a few players. So, Boffelli injured. Lavanini apparently is back. Montero is back as well. And I understand Moyano might be back from injury a little bit sooner than expected. Lavanini back is good news because Kramer evidently is out as well. I expect De La Fuente to come back into that midfield, and it's good to see Lendajo back. I think he scored, the top 4 halfback this week after only spending 20 minutes on the field.
Yeah, you could just
signs are pretty good.
That's right. You could just see the intent there, couldn't you? Every time there was a free kick or a penalty, he's there looking to take it. There were a couple that were pulled back for not being on the mark even.
Yep, that's right. I was playing, I had a 50-point lead and I was playing against Senatla and Hawara's front row. And I could have lost by 30, to be honest. The Hawara's front row, the amount of times that they were almost there and they got pulled down, there was a penalty try, they were just carving through the Sunwolves. So we'll stick with our theory of play your front rows against the Sunwolves. There are going to be a few players from the Sunwolves that are dropped this week, so keep an eye out for the likes of your Matsushimas and your Emmys, because they got the Sharks and the Cheetahs before the playoffs, and they could be okay just to get you over the line. Again, if you've got that spot that you're comfortable in your matchup on a Sunday morning or a Saturday afternoon if you're in South Africa, if you're comfortable with your matchup, you can cut a player that you've got to see if you can beat the waiver wire on Tuesday for Emmy or Matsushima.
Well, I think they're actually better than that in the terms of you're sort of playing it down and talking about matchups, but they've been consistently able to score points against just about anybody. So, Emi and Fukuoka, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think they're, I think they're better than just, like a kind of a waiver wire bench player. If someone's dropped them, I think they've made a mistake.
Yeah, and look, I agree. No, I was underplaying it. I totally agree. They're good players. Any more from Hawara Sunwolves?
No.
Cool. Obviously the Kings and the Brumbies didn't play. You touched on it. You're pretty high on the Kings.
I am. Yeah.
So am I.
I think so. Somebody like Mapipi, who is he's almost kind of become a bit Sergio Peterson like, in that if you watched him, because they have the other winger whose name I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, who was very much stayed out on his wing.
Wandy.
That's him, Wandy, yeah. And you contrast that with Mapipi, who was just sort of popping up everywhere. And that's what you want from a fantasy winger, one guy who's going to come off and get involved. And, so I think they're actually pretty good. And Cronje's points, they kind of stand for themselves. And Yar was good when he was in the team. And apparently he's looking to come back too. I saw an article where they said, he was originally supposed to be out for, whatever number of weeks it was, but he's ahead of schedule or something. So, I think he could be back out by.
They're not different players though, right? It's just names on the jersey. Yara and Banda are exactly the same player, right?
Yeah, Yara and Banda are the same player. That's right, yeah. And I'm looking forward to the commentators having a crack at that one in the same way that they did with Skosan and Mahuza.
Mahuza, yeah, absolutely. Kings front row also been very, very good. They have great playoff fixtures. Well, I say great playoff fixtures. They've got decent playoff fixtures, and they actually include semi-final week 2 as well. And when they were on tour, I'm not sure if many folks picked up on it, but they actually had a hooker that was filling in on the bench at loose forward, so he came on for 20 minutes playing a little bit loose as well. Cronje does have concussion symptoms, but I understand that he should be alright as well. Brumbies have named their team. They've gone back to what they know with Jimmy D and Aiden Toa, so the Thomas Banks experiment, who looked good last week or the week before last, has been shelved for the time being and going back to Aiden Toa. It's a tough matchup against the Lions though. Anything more from this? Actually, one of the Kings' other players that I've been kind of riding for a while now is Burton Klassen. He's been pretty good. He's been really, really strong. And back to your PP point, if he had some really bad kind of Malachi Fukitoa hands in the first half of the season, and he was shelling about 50% of the ones that were coming at him. But he seems to have cleaned that up a little bit now, and he looks strong. He looks really, really good. I've been trying to trade for him as well this week without any success. Anything more from this match, mate? Or not match? Any from these teams?
Just with the Kings front row, like a bit of real dark horse. I mean, they're right up there in terms of points. I think they might have been second at some point, but they have lost one of the props for the season, Foreman, who had scored. I remember him scoring at least one, maybe 2 tries against the Waratahs. So whether that has an impact or not, we'll see. But just something worth noting.
Very good. All right, a quick reminder how you can contact us again. Fantasy Rug Draft, that's Fantasy REG Draft. If you have any questions, flick us a mail at support@fantasyrugdraft.com. Anything more from you, mate?
No, not at this point. I think, we'll probably go into a bit more detail perhaps when we've got more time.
Super. Thanks for listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson. He's Nathan Mossman.
Actually, this was rubbish. Can we just go back and start again?
Healthy repeater.
What a bust here by Christian Cullen. Plenty of support, and what a